Tatanka was one of those characters in wrestling that really shouldn't have worked with any kind of longevity, but it did. Chris Chavis began working for the WWF in 1991 and initially stayed with the company all the way to 1996, riding out some bad business years while still establishing himself as one of the more memorable characters in professional wrestling history. Tatanka was a fan favourite in the mid-card for a great deal of time. Some of the pops that he got from crowds are truly surprising when we look back nowadays, though in saying this, the same rings true for many superstars of the past, as it seems modern WWE fans just don't pop anymore in 2019. But anyway, Tatanka was also involved in some serious allegations which involved lawsuits, court dates and firings. More on that later. In this video, we take a look at Tatanka in the WWF. Chris Chavis was born on June 8, 1961 in North Carolina. He is part of the Lumbee tribe, a state-recognised tribe of North Carolina that has around 60,000 registered members. The earliest reference to any sort of Indian community in the state dates all the way back to 1725. Before getting into wrestling, Chris was involved in powerlifting and bodybuilding, where he had some success but he didn't want to turn pro. He also had tryouts for football teams such as the Raiders and the Dolphins, the latter offering him a free agent contract in the midst of the 1987 NFL players' strike, but Chris turned it down as the money just wasn't good enough. An unplanned meeting with local promoter Bobby the Kid Rogers in a Blockbuster video store though would change the path of his career forever. It's incorrectly reported that Chris met Buddy Rogers at the Blockbuster store, but this is not true. As the real story goes, Bobby thought Chris looked like money and it was Bobby who arranged for Chris to meet Nature Boy Buddy Rogers. Chris at the time wasn't a wrestling fan, but his curiosity got the better of him. He began renting out wrestling tapes and watching the WWF on Saturday mornings. Chris said, "Every time I'd see Bobby, he started baiting that hook. I'm not someone who can be hooked easily, but I did start watching wrestling on Saturday mornings. The WWF was unbelievably hot. The more I watched these guys, it started to hit me. The arenas were sold out, the crowd response was huge, these guys were celebrities and the merchandise was selling. I started to look at it as a business move." Chris was already making good money in his job at the time, making around $100,000 a year working as a manager in Bally's Health and Tennis Corporation. Buddy Rogers though eventually talked Chris into contacting Larry Sharpe, a wrestling bio's favourite for some unplanned reason, and Chris began training in the Munster factory in 1989. The first recorded match we have for Tatanka was for the North American Wrestling Association in March of 1990, and funnily enough, the first known match for Tatanka here was a TV taping. He worked the semi-main before Ricky Steamboat took on Bob Orton Jr. in the main event, and this is a great spot on any card for any wrestler in his first days in the business. The North American Wrestling Association was owned by WWF booker George Scott, and Tatanka's time in the company was used to get him prepared for a WWF tryout. Chris had his tryout match with the WWF in 1991 and Vince McMahon liked what he saw. It took him until the end of 91 to truly begin his WWF run, but once he did, it was a non-stop schedule. The Tatanka character debuted on the January 8th edition of Wrestling Challenge, with Tatanka defeating the Brooklyn Brawler in around 2.5 minutes. Tatanka itself is a word from the Lakota language, which translates to buffalo. So before we go any further, let's put something to rest and get it out of the way. A lot is made of Tatanka's undefeated streak in the WWF, with many saying that Tatanka's streak lasted longer than Goldberg's. It didn't. Tatanka was beaten on house shows quite a few times, so I honestly don't really think of Tatanka's run here as an undefeated streak. Yes, this winning streak was during a time when fans worldwide didn't have access to house show results online and information was spread at a much slower rate. Also, I understand that WWF house shows at the time were developed to be a total separate entity as to what we saw on TV screens. but still, Tatanka was defeated. Someone who got defeated didn't have an undefeated streak. So yeah, now that that's out of the way, let's continue on. Tatanka's first big program was against Rick Martel, culminating in a match at WrestleMania 8, which was also Tatanka's pay-per-view debut. The model Rick Martel was the perfect opponent for Tatanka, with Martel being lavish and vain, whereas Tatanka was a no-nonsense Native American who didn't really care about a materialistic lifestyle. Their match here at WrestleMania was decent when you consider the insane time constraints placed on these older shows for mid-carders. So good was the Martel vs Tatanka feud that it would be revisited a few times in the months that followed. At the Survivor Series in 1992, Tatanka vs Martel was booked once again after Martel stole Tatanka's Lumbee feathers, a symbol of Tatanka's Lumbee heritage. Their Survivor Series match here, in my opinion, was much better than the WrestleMania match, and this is the one I recommend you check out after watching this video. The Survivor Series match is also a great example of how over Tatanka had gotten in such a quick amount of time. The fans loved him. Tatanka opened up WrestleMania 9 with Shawn Michaels in a pretty decent match, but it's surrounded in controversy. As we know, Tatanka was being booked as undefeated during this time, and the world pretty much expected Tatanka to win the IC title here at WrestleMania 9. The widely reported story is that Shawn Michaels had the match finish changed as he didn't want to drop the title to Tatanka, so a count-out ending occurred instead. Now, this information is based on an interview that Tatanka gave where he said that Bret Hart and The Undertaker told him that the Clique spread rumours about him. Tatanka said in this interview, "My good friends Undertaker and Bret Hart wanted to talk to me about WrestleMania. Now, WrestleMania 10 was around the corner and I said, 'You want to talk to me about WrestleMania 10? And they go, no, we want to talk last year's WrestleMania, WrestleMania 9. Undertaker said to me, "You've got a great spot, you're doing fantastic, but last year Shawn went around spreading rumours with his clique that you were getting an attitude. They were going to give you the belt." At that time I was undefeated, I was very hot, the fans connected with me. At WrestleMania 9, after they rang the bell, I did my war cry and the whole place lit up. They wanted me to win the title that night, but also Shawn knew the build-up, being undefeated, a fan favourite. During that time, you kept the belts for a long time and Shawn knew if I won the belt, I'd have it for a while. Now, a few things here. Firstly, I don't imagine Undertaker running around and accusing people of spreading rumours while, in essence, Undertaker here is doing the exact same thing. It sounds like Undertaker is shit-stirring here and it's just something I don't imagine him doing. Secondly, there was no Clique in April of 1993. Diesel made his way to the WWF in June that year. Sean Waltman didn't arrive until 3 weeks after WrestleMania. Razor was there, but I hardly consider Shawn and Razor as a clique. Shawn has stated that he felt very lonely in the WWF around this time, and this was one of the reasons he wanted to bring Diesel in as his hater. So yeah, to me, Tatanka's story doesn't really add up. I'm not saying Shawn didn't have some sort of role in changing the finish, but we don't really know for sure, and we are basing this information on facts that don't really add up. But anyway, what's done is done, and Tatanka did not win the IC title at WrestleMania. Tatanka wouldn't win a single belt during his entire WWF run. Tatanka suffered his first televised loss that same year. In October, on an episode of Superstars, Tatanka was defeated by Ludvig Borga, and after the match, he was attacked by Yokozuna. The rematch was scheduled for the 1994 Royal Rumble, but Borga got injured and subsequently replaced by Bam Bam Bigelow. Tatanka won the match. Vince McMahon had initially seen big things in Ludvig Borga due to the name he had made for himself in Japan, but the character tanked in the WWF badly. Tatanka was the sacrificial lamb here in many ways. When IRS insisted that Tatanka should pay gift tax on a full-length Lumbee headdress, which was given to him by Wahoo McDaniel and Chief Jay Strongbow, a feud was started between the two men. Tatanka would then enter into a short feud with Lex Luger, who Tatanka accused of being a sellout to the $1 Million Man. They had a match at SummerSlam 1994 that saw Tatanka actually selling out and joining the $1 Million Corporation, turning heel in the process. Tatanka got the win in this match, which speaks highly of where Lex Luger was the year prior to what he had become in a year's time. Tatanka in the $1 Million Corporation then, and well, he was just there. He was another lackey in a faction that already pretty much housed every other WWF heel at the time. To be fair, at this point, the character had run its course as a babyface, and no real deep storylines, nor big title wins seemed to ever happen, so the heel turn was probably the best thing to happen. Although the $1 Million Corporation just seemed like a place for all heels to eventually end up. Turncoat Tatanka would continue to work with Lex Luger, and eventually he feuded with Bam Bam Bigelow, who had left the corporation to start an uneventful babyface run. This brings us to August 30th, 1995. On this date, Tatanka was suspended from the WWF as the company was taking precautions due to a lawsuit being filed by a woman who had been staying in the same hotel as WWF Superstars. This woman from Anaheim, California, accused several wrestlers of abusing her, claiming the incident took place following a house show in December of '94. Among those accused were Jimmy Del Rey and Tatanka. Kevin Nash had said the woman was also at the bar with him and Undertaker earlier in the night, but when Nash was leaving the hotel the next day, he noticed the woman was talking to police officers and she had half of her head shaved off. The hallways of the hotel were also smeared in blood. Kevin Nash also said that he immediately presumed the person responsible was Jimmy Del Rey, as he had been accused of things of this nature before. But anyway, it's been reported that Jimmy Del Rey threw Tatanka under the bus here and attempted to shift the blame onto him, but when it went to court, Tatanka's attorney was able to provide facts that cleared him completely of any wrongdoing. Jimmy Del Rey was fired and Tatanka's suspension was lifted. Tatanka returned at the 1996 Royal Rumble where he competed in the Rumble match, however he was eliminated by Diesel. In February, he lost to The Undertaker in a match on Raw, and from there he put over Ahmed Johnson on the house show loop. His final match of this run was against Bret Hart on the 11th of March 1996 episode of Raw, taking a loss to the Hitman in what was actually a pretty good match. Tatanka stepped away from wrestling to spend more time with his family, but he did work a few independent dates in the years that followed. Tatanka made a return to the WWE in 2005, where he ended up getting rehired on a full-time schedule. The gimmick here, though, admittedly, wasn't really fitting into this newer generation of WWE wrestling. This year-long run saw Tatanka being used in the mid-card, and I can only be honest here, but it didn't really work. He teamed up with Matt Hardy for a pay-per-view match against Eminem at No Way Out 2006, and had a few matches against The Miz, of which he lost. He was then booked into a losing streak, blaming referees for his own shortcomings. It wasn't very good at all, and in the end, Tatanka ended up asking for his release, which was granted. In late 2015, the WWE announced that they had signed Tatanka to a Legends contract. And that's really it for Tatanka. During his initial babyface run and while working with Rick Martel, Tatanka got over huge with WWF audiences. The whole televised Undefeated streak worked out well for him, but booking decisions along the way hurt Tatanka also. Not saying for a moment that he would have been WWF champion had he been given the ball, but some smarter booking could really have helped Tatanka in climbing up the ranks. If you watch WrestleMania 9's opening match again, you can see the crowd here was ready for Tatanka to capture the IC title, and while hindsight is 2020 and we know what would become of Shawn Michaels in comparison to Tatanka, you can't help but wonder how things may have turned out had he won this match, which he was supposedly booked to initially win. Tatanka wasn't a bad wrestler, nor was he a technical wizard, but fans liked him back in the day, and he became one of those instantly recognizable superstars of the early 90s. This fact wasn't wasted on his parents, who felt that wrestling would have been a poor career choice. This fact wasn't wasted on his pairing. Fucking pairing. What the fuck's a pairing? When IRS insisted that Tatanka should pay gift tax on a full-length Lumbee headdress which was given to him by Wahoo. This is fucking stupid.